Welcome to Sciencera. In this video, we're going to cover chapter number 8, Special Senses. Introduction. General senses of touch in our body include temperature, thermoreceptors, pressure, mechanoreceptors. Pain also involves mechanoreceptors. Special senses, there are five special senses: smell, taste, sight, hear, and equilibrium. Smell involves chemoreceptor, taste also involves chemoreceptor, sight, photoreceptor, hearing, mechanoreceptor, and equilibrium also mechanoreceptors. Let's start with eye and vision, anatomy of eye. Accessory structures of the eye include extrinsic eye muscles, eyelids, conjunctiva, and lacrimal apparatus. Eyes are protected by eyelids anteriorly, also by the medial commissure and lateral commissures. Palpebral fissures are the spaces between eyelids. Eyelashes are associated with tarsal glands projecting from each border of eyelid, lubricates the eye. Ciliary gland duct open at the eyelash follicles, and lacrimal caruncles produce whitish secretion, lubricating the eye. Conjunctiva is delicate membrane which covers the eyelid and the other outer surface of the eyeball. It ends at the edge of transparent cornea by fusing with cornea epithelium. Next is anatomy of eye. Lacrimal apparatus containing lacrimal glands are located above the lateral end of the eye. They release tears which flushes across the eyeball into the lacrimal calculi medially, then into the lacrimal sac, and finally into the nasal lacrimal duct, which empties into the inferior meatus of the nasal cavity. Tears contain mucus, antibodies, and lysosomes and enzymes that destroy bacteria. Da- Daily cleanse and protect the eye surface as their moisture in and lubricate. Six is extrinsic eye muscles are attached to the outer surface, plays a role in eye movement. The six extrinsic eye muscles are lateral rectus, action is to move eye laterally. Medial rectus, action is to move eye medially. Superior rectus elevates eye and turn it medially. Inferior rectus depresses the eye and turn it medially. Inferior oblique muscle elevate eye and turn it laterally, and superior oblique muscle depresses the eye and turn it laterally. The eyeballs are composed of three tunics, and its interior is filled with fluid called humors, which help maintain the shape. The layer forming the eye wall of the eyeball include fibrous layer, vascular layer, and sensory layer. Let's look at each of the layers in detail. Starting with the outermost fibrous layer, it consists of protective sclera and transparent cornea. Sclera is the white of eye interior. Central anterior portion of fibrous layer is crystal clear. Light enters through cornea, the only tissue which is never rejected for transplant. Then we have middle vascular layer. Posterior is choroid, which contain dark pigment which prevent light from scattering inside the eye. The ciliary body is which is attached to lens by ciliary ligament called ciliary zonules and the iris. The pigment iris has rounded opening. The pupil through which light passes. In close vision, circular muscles contract, pupil constrict in the distant vision. Radial fibers contract. To enlarge the pupil which allows light to enter eye, cranial nerve 3 controls the muscles of iris. The last is the innermost sensory layer. It is the innermost sensory layer is the two-layered retina. The outer pigmented layer of retina prevent light from scattering, act as phagocytes to remove dead cells and store vitamin A for vision. The neural layer contains rods and cone, which are photoreceptors. Electrical signal pass from photoreceptor via two neuron chain, bipolar cells and then ganglionic cell before leaving the retina via optic nerve and then interpreted by the optic cortex. There are no photoreceptor receptors at optic disc which result in the blind spot in our vision. Cones allow us to see as the details of the world. Densest cones are densest in the center of retina. They decrease in number towards the retinal edge. Fovea centralis only contain cones, therefore it is the site of greatest visual acuity. There are three types of cone. Type 1 vigorously respond to the blue light, type 2 respond to the green light, and type 3 respond to the range including both green and red wavelength of light. Type 3 is also known as the red cones. Lens. Light is focused on retina by flexible bioconvex lens held upright in eye by ciliary zonules and attached to the ciliary body. Lens divide eye into the anterior chamber which contain aqueous humor and posterior chamber which contain vitreous humor. Vitreous humor prevent eyeball from collapsing inward and aqueous humor maintain the intraocular pressure and provide nutrient for lens and cornea. Aqueous humor is reabsorbed by venous blood through the sclera, venous sinuses located at the junction of sclera and cornea. Pathway of light and refraction. Refraction is the bending of light rays in eye through cornea, aqueous humor, lens and vitreous humor. Greater the lens convexity, more the light it bends. Flatter the lens, less it bends the light. Light from the distance approach eye as parallel rays, however, light from the close object diverge to make vision possible. Accommodation is ability of eye to focus specific object. Reversed and inverted image form at retina due to the light bending is a real image also seen in the diagram. Visual fields and pathway to the brain. Axon carrying impulses from retina are bundled together at the posterior aspect of eyeball and leave the back of eye as the optic nerve. At the optic chiasma, the fibers from the medial side of each eye cross over to the opposite side of the brain. The fiber tract that results are the optic tract. Each optic tract contains fiber from lateral side of the eye on the same side and medial side of the opposite eye. The optic tract fiber synapse with neurons in thalamus whose axon form the optic radiation which run to the occipital lobe of the brain. There are there the synapse with cortical cells and visual interpretation of seeing occur. Humans have binocular vision. Binocular vision literally means two-eyed vision, provides for depth perception, also called 3D vision, as our visual cortex fuses the two slightly different images delivered by the two eye into one picture. Eye reflexes. Internal muscles are controlled by the autonomic nervous system. Bright light causes pupil to constrict through action of radial or iris and ciliary muscles. Photopupillary reflex. Viewing close object cause accommodation pupillary reflex. External muscles control eye movement to follow the object voluntary, controlled at the frontal eye field. Viewing close object cause convergence, eye move medially. Eye pathologies. The first one is inflammation of conjunctiva, also called conjunctivitis, result in reddened and irritated eye. Pink eye, its infectious form caused by bacteria or virus, is highly contagious. Lack of all three types result in total color blindness, whereas lack of one cone type lead to partial color blindness. Cataract, the loss of lens transparency, cause vision to become hazy and distorted and can even eventually cause blindness. If drainage of aqueous humor is blocked, fluid backs up like a clogged sink. Pressure within the eye may increase to dangerous level and compress the delicate retina and optic nerve. The resulting condition will be glaucoma. Hemianopia is the loss of same side of the visual field of both eye, which result from the damage to the visual cortex on one side only. Nearsightedness or myopia occurs when the parallel light rays from the distant object fail to reach the retina and instead are focused in front of it. Farsightedness, also known as hyperopia, occurs when the parallel light from distant objects are focused behind the retina, at least in the resting eye, in which the lens is flat and ciliary muscles is relaxed. You can see in the diagram myopia, nearsightedness, and hyperopia, farsighted eye. Moving on to the ear, hearing and balance. The ear houses two senses: hearing, interpreted in the auditory cortex of the temporal lobe, and equilibrium, balance, interpreted in cerebellum. Receptors in the ear are mechanoreceptor, different organ house receptors for each sense. Let's look at the anatomy of ear. The first part is outer ear, composed of auricles and external acoustic meatus. Auricle or pinna is the shell-shaped structure surrounding the auditory canal opening. External acoustic meatus or auditory canal is a short narrow chamber carved into the temporal bone of the skull. The curiominious gland secretes waxy yellow crumen or earwax, which provides sticky trap for foreign bodies and repel insects. Sound waves entering the auditory canal eventually hit the tympanic membrane or eardrum and cause it to vibrate. The canal ends at the eardrum, which separate the external from the middle ear. Then we have the middle ear. The middle ear cavity, also known as tympanic cavity, is a small air-filled mucus-lined cavity within the temporal bone. It is flanked laterally by the eardrum and medially by a bony wall with two openings, the oval windows and inferior membrane-covered round window. The pharyngotympanic tube equalized pressure runs obliquely downward to link the middle ear cavity with the throat, and the mucosa lining the two regions are continuous. When pressures are unequal, the eardrum bulges inward and outward, causing hearing difficulties and sometimes ear aches. Tympanic cavity is spanned by three smallest bone in body, the ossicles, which transmit the vibratory motion of the eardrum to the fluids of the inner ear. These ossicles, or these bones named for their shape, are hammer, anvil, and the stirrup. When eardrum moves, it moves the hammer and transfers the vibration to the anvil. The anvil in turn passes the vibration onto the stirrup, which presses on the oval window of the inner ear. The movement at the oval window sets the fluid of the inner ear into the motion, eventually exciting the hearing receptor. The last part of the ear is internal ear. It is maze of bony chambers called bony labyrinth or osseous labyrinth, located deep within the temporal bone behind eye socket. The three subdivisions of the bony labyrinth are spiraling pea-sized cochlea, vestibule, and the semicircular canal. The vestibule is situated between the semicircular canal and cochlea. The bony labyrinth is filled with plasma-like fluid called perilymph. Suspended in perilymph is the membranous labyrinth, a system of membrane sac that follows the shape of the bony labyrinth. The membranous labyrinth itself contains a thicker fluid called endolymph. Static equilibrium. Within the membranous sac of vestibules are receptors called maculae. Macula report on changes in the position of the head in space. It provides information on which way is up and down, help us to keep our head erect. Each macula is a patch of receptor cells with their hair embedded in autolytic membrane, a gelatinous mass studded with otoliths, tiny stone made of calcium salt. As the head moves, the otoliths roll in response to change in the pull of gravity. This movement creates a pull on gel, which in turn bend the hair of the hair cells. Bending activates the hair cell, which send impulse along the vestibular nerve, a division of cranial nerve 8, to the cerebellum of brain, informing it for the position of head in space. Dynamic equilibrium receptors found in semicircular canal respond to angular or rotational movement of the head. The semicircular canals are oriented in three planes of the space. Within ampulla, swollen region at these base of each membranous semicircular canal are multi-receptors region called a crista ampullaris, which consists of the tuft of hair cells covered with gelatinous cap called cupula. When your head moves in an arc-like or angular direction, the endolymph in the canal legs the movement. Then, as cupula drag against the stationary endolymph, the cupula bends with body's motion. This stimulates the hair cell, and impulses are transmitted up by the vestibular nerve to the cerebellum. Bending the cupula in the opposite direction reduces the impulse. Let's look at the process of hearing. Events involved in hearing. There are six events involved in hearing. Number one, sound wave arrived at the tympanic membrane. Number two, movement of tympanic membrane caused displacement of auditory ossicles. Number three, movement of the stapes at the oval window establishes pressure wave in perilymph of the vestibular duct. Number 4. The pressure wave distort the basilar membrane on their way to round window of tympanic duct. Number 5. Vibration of basilar membrane cause vibration of hair cells against the tectorial membrane. And lastly, information about the region and intensity of stimulation is relayed to the central nervous system over the cochlear branch of cranial nerve 8. Hearing and equilibrium deficits. Deafness Deafness is defined as hearing loss of any degree, from a slight loss to a total inability to hear sound. Temporary or permanent conduction deafness result when something interferes with conduction of sound vibration to the fluids of the inner ear. Conduction deafness includes fusion of the ossicles, a problem called otosclerosis, a ruptured eardrum, or otitis media, inflammation of the middle ear. Sensor, Sensory neural deafness occurs when there is degeneration or damage to the receptor cell in spiral organ of corti, to the cochlear nerve, or to the neurons of auditory cortex. Equilibrium problems are usually obvious. Nausea, dizziness, and problem in maintaining balance are the common symptoms, particularly when impulse from the vestibular apparatus disagree with what we see our visual input. Meniere's syndrome is another hearing deficit. Suspected causes are atherosclerosis, degeneration of cranial nerve 8, and increased pressure of the inner ear fluids. Affected individuals become nauseated and often have howling or ringing sound in their ears and vertigo. Then we have chemical senses. The first one is smell. The receptor for taste and olfaction are classified as chemoreceptor. They respond to the chemical in solution. The olfactory receptor cells are neurons equipped with olfactory hair, bathed by layer of mucus secreted by underlying glands. When olfactory receptors located on the cilia are stimulated by chemical dissolved in mucus, they transmit impulse along the olfactory filament, which are bundled axons of olfactory neuron that collectively make up the olfactory nerve or cranial nerve 1. The olfactory nerve conducts the impulse to the olfactory cortex of the brain. There, the odor is interpreted and an odor snapshot is made. The olfactory pathway are closely tied into the lymphatic system, emotional visceral part of the brain. The next is sense of taste. The dorsal tongue surface is covered with small peg-like projections or papillae. The taste buds are found on the side of the large, round wallet papillae or circumvallate papillae on the top of the more numerous fungiform papillae and in the foliate papillae on the side of the tongue. The specific receptor cells that respond to chemical dissolved in saliva are epithelial cells called gustatory cells. Their long microvilli, the gustatory hair, protrudes through the taste pore, and when they are stimulated, they depolarize and impulses are transmitted to the brain. Three cranial nerve, 7, 9, and 10 carry traced impulses from the various taste bud to the gustatory cortex. The facial nerve, 7, serves the interior part of the tongue. The other two cranial nerve, the glossopharyngeal nerve and vagus nerve, serves the other taste bud containing areas. Taste buds are replaced every 7 to 10 days by basal cell or stem cells found in deeper region of the taste bud. Taste receptors. There are five basic taste sensations, each corresponding to stimulation of one of the five major type of taste bud. The sweet receptor respond to the substance such as sugar, saccharine, some amino acids, and some blood salts. Sour receptor respond to hydrogen ion or the acidity of the solution. Bitter receptor to alkaloid and salty receptor to the metal ion in solution. Umami, a taste discovered by the Japanese, is elected by amino acid glutamate, which appears to be reasonable for the beef taste of the steak and flavor the flavor of monosodium glutamate, a food additive. Historically, the tip of the tongue was believed to be the most sensitive of sweet and salty substance, its side to sour and the back of the tongue to bitter and pharynx to umami. Most taste buds respond to 2, 3, 4, or even all 5 taste modalities. This brings us to the development aspect of special senses. Special senses organs are formed early in embryonic development. Maternal infection during the first 5 or 6 months of pregnancy may cause visual abnormalities as well as sensorineural deafness in developing child. An important congenital eye problem is strabismus. The most important congenital ear problem is the lack of external acoustic meatus. Vision require the most learning. The infant has poor visual activity, is far-sighted, and lack color vision and depth perception at birth. The eye continues to grow and mature until age of 8 or 9. Problems of aging associated with vision include presbyopia, glaucoma, cataract, arteriosclerosis of the eye's blood vessels. The newborn infant can hear sound, but initial responses are reflexive. By the toddler stage, the child is listening critically and beginning to imitate sound as language development begins. Sensory neural deafness or presbycusis is normal consequence of aging. Taste and smell are most acute at birth and decrease in sensitivity after age of 40 as the number of olfactory and gustatory receptor decreases. This was all about the special senses. Thank you for watching. If you like my video, don't forget to subscribe for more.